Okay, I'm back. So as I mentioned before we got going, this being the beginning of the year and ways that we want to maybe look at what there is to let go of and how we want to continue on our path of awakening in this lifetime, that the Buddha identified these 10 qualities, which he talked about a lot, even though they weren't ever enumerated by him, as I spoke about from that story about Sumedho. But all of these qualities are necessary for developing an awakened life. And so today, these can be cultivations of these 10 virtues. They're really more important than ever, and they're very useful for us as householders, not just monastics. And as in the time of the Buddha, the path to freedom in our modern world begins with a generous heart and patient mind. And patience and generosity help increase feelings of peace and joy and ease of heart in our daily life. And these qualities support skillful navigation of everyday circumstances that can create suffering and confusion and difficult times. Patience and generosity offer another way of being with a strength and clarity that can lead to deep and more lasting wisdom. And if you came to my day-long retreat last August, I spent quite a bit of time talking then about patience. It's always my favorite one of my favorites of the paramis. And if I sort of briefly mention them, but today I think I want to bring out a little more once again of loving kindness, because it seems like there can never be enough of it. But of the perfections, generosity is they're not really done in order, but they can nurture each other. That generosity is sort of stated at the beginning because it's common really to all beings, and each of us as ordinary people can practice giving, and it's sort of the easiest to practice. It has characteristics of letting go, and it has a function to dispel greed for things that can be given away, and it helps manifest non-attachment. And that naturally leads into virtue, which is right after giving, because virtue can purify both the giver and the receiver. And so while giving benefits others, virtue prevents the affliction of others. That in order to state a factor of abstinence immediately after a factor of a positive energy. So in order to show the cause for, say, an achievement of a favorable state for future existence, like someone wants to achieve wealth, virtue has this characteristic of dispelling moral, well, it's called blameless conduct, that we can begin seeing the manifestation of a kind of moral purity, that our conduct, if we are virtuous in our conduct, we cannot be blamed. It's the blamelessness. And sometimes you hear that in some of the other Buddhist writings, the blamelessness of virtue. It's even considered an adornment. So when we hear in some of those chants around adornment, and you wonder, well, what, it we adorn ourselves with associating with people who are also in the practice, like us in our sitting group. And it's referred to, virtue is referred to as cherished more highly than necklaces and diamond earrings and that kind of thing. So it surpasses material wealth because, thieves can't take it, and it enables us to achieve a power over our minds, really. So we're having, it's having a protective effect. The 5 precepts, it's virtuous behavior. It helps us protect ourselves from ill will and hatred, and it then also flows into renunciation, because renunciation perfects the achievement of virtue. So in order to have good conduct of mind right after the virtue of good conduct of body and speech, this begins to help purify the heart and the mind through letting go. And this state of letting go of mental obsessions also gets included here in renunciation. It's a wholesome act of consciousness that occurs through the external parts of letting go of craving and craving to become something, and helps us see the unsatisfactory nature of things. And we see that it's accompanied by compassion and skillful means. So renunciation flows next into wisdom. And it's the renunciation is sort of perfected by wisdom. Wisdom shows us clearly. Sometimes there's an approximate cause of wisdom, that of manifestation of concentration. So wisdom has this characteristic of penetrating really specific nature of phenomenon. So when we're sitting and seeing what arises, this characteristic of pure penetration is wisdom. It's like the arrow shot by a skillful archer, that its function is to illuminate the field. And so it's like there's no confusion when wisdom is present, because it's seeing clearly when we have absence of ill will, when we have absence of aversion, or it shows us clearly when we're clinging to wanting something to be different than the way it is. And it's through this wisdom that we can, as it's referred to, cross the stream. We can cross the stream of suffering. And through compassion, we can lead others to also cross. And wisdom, it understands the suffering of others. And it's through compassion that we strive to eliminate the suffering of ourselves and others. And that and wisdom is the opposite of greed and hatred and delusion. And this knowledge of insight restores that clarity. And so that is also nurtured by energy. It's the energy, once again, is the perfection of the wisdom. And so it takes energy, patience, um, the right amount of activity, of wise concentration to keep the practice going with just the right amount of energy. And once that can happen, patience comes along. And patience is one of these adornments of energy. It's said that the patience of the energetic person shines with splendor. Patience is, it's the, what would you call it? Sort of like the, not exactly weapon, but it's the guide of good and developing these qualities, expelling the not good ones that we're noticing, and having patience to return again to what's here in the present moment. And when there's patience, the mind can be concentrated, even if all we are seeing is something that we might be rejecting, like I'm impatient, or I'm angry, or I'm hanging on to something, or I want this positive state to continue. It's wisdom's there to see that, and energy is there to hold it, and patience arises so that we can develop concentration that's free from external distraction. And when the mind is concentrated, then all these formations that arise and pass away appear impermanent. And we begin to see them as not self. And so we can see then more clearly that there isn't any really agency in anything. Nothing is solid. And that begins to show us the truthfulness that is that helps virtue be possible. That states can arise and be sort of pull us backwards, and these perfections as we see them, they're grounded in truth, and they're clarified by letting go, and they're intensified by a peacefulness, and they're purified by wisdom. And so it's this determination and resolve to stay in truthfulness, this determination to stay on the path, to have an aspiration for awakening, that the resolve is really necessary, because we know it's easy for us to just sort of fall back on habituated mind states. And so the determination and resolve, I mean, who knows, it's going to be eons of time. And so then we have loving kindness to really wish to provide happiness for ourselves and for others, and that compassion and skillful means, all of this is happening within loving kindness, because loving kindness helps perfect the determination to undertake the activity of that welfare for ourselves and for others. And so the qualities of loving kindness are reflected upon. And I think I'll go over the Metta Sutta if I have a chance to tonight. Because by holding ourselves and others in kindness, we promote our own well-being. We promote welfare for others, and it allows us to develop wholesome roots and be sort of an object of reflection, an object of reverence, and that kindness then is also held in a kind of non-reactivity. So the last on these 10 perfections is equanimity. That in order to have a non-reactivity, we have to hold ourselves and others in kindness and not fall into extremes. Notice before we fall into extremes. If there isn't equanimity, then these actions that are performed by others can cause all kinds of oscillating in our mind. And when the mind is flipping back and forth and oscillating, it's really hard to practice these requisites of awakening. Because even though the mind is softened and moistened with loving kindness, without equanimity, we can't really purify those requisites of enlightenment. And so equanimity offers something to bring balance, and it allows us to purify these virtues without thinking about all the obstacles all the time in one's life that can stop us. And so I have a few quotes, simple quotes from each of the paramis. And maybe once before, I think I put it in the chat a long time ago, but I'll just go over these briefly and then we'll go back a little more to loving kindness. Dana, or generosity, the quote is, "If beings knew as I know the benefit of generosity, they would not let an opportunity go by without sharing." If beings knew as I know the benefits of generosity, they would not let an opportunity go by without sharing. And for sila, or virtue, virtue has non-remorse as its benefit and reward. Non-remorse has gladness as its benefit and reward. Gladness has joy as its benefit and reward. Joy has serenity as its benefit and reward. Serenity has happiness as its benefit and reward. Happiness has concentration as its benefit and reward. Concentration has insightful understanding as its benefit and reward. Insightful understanding has non-attachment as its benefit and reward. Non-attachment has liberation as its benefit and reward. In this way, virtue leads step by step to the highest. And then in renunciation, this quote is from Dilgo Kenshe Rinpoche. Renunciation implies the strong wish to free oneself not only from life's immediate sorrows, but from the seemingly unending cycle of conditioned existence. With this renunciation comes a heartfelt weariness and disillusionment with the endless quest for gratification, approval, profit, and status. And so as we begin to see the advantages of letting go, Ramana Maharshi Sayadaw U Tejaniya comes for the next quote for Panya about wisdom. Wisdom inclines toward the good, but it is not attached to it. It shies away from what is not good, but has no aversion to it. Wisdom recognizes the difference between skillful and unskillful, and it clearly sees the undesirability of the unskillful. It clearly sees it. So when we're sitting in our practice and we realize that we're lost in some unskillful behavior happening, we know that wisdom is present when we wake up and we see that this is something unskillful. We don't need to dwell there. We can just go back to renunciation, let it go, and wisdom is present. Ramana Maharshi spoke about Viriya, or energy, when he said, "No one succeeds without effort. Mind at peace is not your birthright. Those who succeed owe their liberation to perseverance." Then we have the Buddha again on Khanti, or patience. Patience is the supreme virtue. I think we probably all know that. We've heard it so many different ways. Patience is a virtue. Well, it really is a supreme virtue. Patience on this long path. And with truthfulness, better than 1,000 useless words is one single word that brings peace. The Buddha. And on resolution, resolve, adhitthana, the Buddha said, these are the 4 resolves: the resolve for wisdom, the resolve for truth, the resolve for generosity, the resolve for peace. One should not neglect wisdom, should preserve truth, should cultivate generosity, and should train in peace. I'm going to read that one again. These are the 4 resolves: the resolve for wisdom, the resolve for truth, the resolve for generosity, and the resolve for peace. One should not neglect wisdom, should preserve truth, should cultivate generosity, and should train in peace. And then we have loving kindness. Hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone. This is the eternal law. From the Buddha. Hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone. This is the eternal law. And lastly, equanimity. All beings are owners of their actions. Their happiness and unhappiness depends on their actions and not upon my wishes. So my teachers, Kamala Masters and Steve Armstrong, compiled those quotes. And Steve also made some brief sentences around letting go around each of these practices, which I think I distributed once a while back. I know you got it, Doug. That was a while ago. So I've just noticed for myself that it's been the last few years, as I reflect on the paramis, sometimes put more attention to them than others, that the Metta Sutta, the Buddha's sermon on this kind of impartial kindness, has become more one of my principal texts in a way, because I think it represents an overview of the entire practice path that the Buddha taught. And it begins with this challenging and inspiring line: "This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace." And it continues with instructions for morality practice and mental discipline and the cultivation of wisdom. And I love this text because it's totally unequivocal. The cultivation of unshakable goodwill toward all beings, omitting none. And it's a practice that's made through the gladness and the safety that is the fruit of those firm ethics that liberates the mind from fixed views so that its essential peace is undisturbed. In the English translation, it's like 42 phrases long. And it's really delightful to say, okay, right here, this is the path. This is the Eightfold Path, 42 phrases. And intention is the key. Even though the Buddha left his family and he adopted a monastic lifestyle to support his practice, these days most of us apply ourselves to this same practice in the midst of our worldly lives. And intention plays a crucial role to the development of our practice. We get a lot more distracted by a lot of things. And we think about the word practice. How long have you been practicing? Or somebody asks us that, or we think about it. And, in a way, we've been practicing our entire lives. Since the day we were born, trying to adapt to changing, to these circumstances that are always changing, and trying the best we can to feel, reasonably content. I was actually talking to somebody today in Tango who was telling me about all the reason why she really liked meditation so much. And she's a tango dancer and a belly dancer and very passionate person. And she was saying that she tries so many different things and, none of them bring lasting happiness. And so if we're lucky, at some point we realize that, just like Prince Siddhartha did, that this anxious kind of discomfort that we often feel when we're faced with challenges is a universal habit of mind. And we also realize sometimes through this innate natural wisdom that we can hear maybe with the teachings when we hear them, or, we can start to notice which mind habits we might be able to change. And we start imagining, at least I've done this, kind of living my life with a kind of passion that's geared toward equanimity, that a kind of emotional response to my own needs and to the needs of others. It's an essential aha moment. This glimpse of happiness that's the beginning of wise understanding, wise aspiration. That's on the Eightfold Path, the intention at the beginning of the Eightfold Path. And in the Metta Sutta, the person, the practitioner, is given the instruction to not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. I love that line. It's this basis for the development of ethics as a transformational practice, and it doesn't leave any wiggle room for anything less than impeccability. And This means that morality requires wise mindfulness, wise concentration, wise effort. All of those are in the Eightfold Path, in the addition to supporting their development. And any one of the aspects of the Eightfold Path is like a holographic echo of all the others. And that practicing any one element is the same as practicing them all. Wise action, wise speech, wise livelihood. All three path elements that translate into the 5 precepts for lay people of non-harming, non-exploiting, not using speech judiciously, and using sexuality judiciously, and keeping away from the use of intoxicants that cloud the mind. And we're encouraged to reflect upon those as part of our daily meditation practice if we embrace the precepts on a fairly regular basis, remind ourselves. And then the main body of the Metta Sutta is, in essence, the goodwill toward all beings, no matter what. And it's not unusual when we start talking about these teachings that, people sort of say incredulously, I don't have to forgive so-and-so, do I? And it's really difficult for that person to imagine that it's possible to recognize that someone who might be dangerous or harmful, and that we still want to refer to them with kindness. We want to respond to that person with clarity so that we don't have ill will arise in our mind. I have to look here at my phone for a minute because it says low battery. To make sure that it's charging, but I can't quite tell really, so I hope it is. Everything seems to be plugged in. And so Sharon, or not Sharon Salzberg, but Sylvia Bernstein, I read a quote from her not that long ago around this issue where she said, her father used to say, I need to remember my anger to fuel my social activism. And then Sylvia said back, no, you don't. You need to recognize it in order to arouse you to action. And then you need to act with a clear mind. So you don't need the anger to fuel the activism. We need to recognize it, and that arouses the energy and the action, and then we act from a clear mind. And so, it seems to me that metta practice, specific attention to the presence or absence of goodwill, ill will in the mind, is a subset of mindfulness practice, and it's part of what the Buddha taught as the third foundation of mindfulness, attention to the contents of the mind. That's what we've been talking about in our Tuesday class of mindfulness of the mind. And using the 4 foundations, and using the 4 foundations, the attention to body, feelings, mind, and mental contents as this template, then it's an emphasis on a mind that meets all experience with warm cordiality. A mind that meets all experience with warm cordiality. Now that is something to aspire to. And we can see that metta and mindfulness are inextricably part of one another. So we need mindfulness and metta to balance each other. And so in the Metta Sutta this is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and knows the path of peace. our ability to wish well impartially. It's connected to our ability to let go of fixed views that cause distress that arises in the mind. As soon as we start noticing that we have these fixed views, that's when we notice distress in the mind. And it also states whether standing or walking, seated or lying down. So we do this practice all of the time. And it demonstrates that all of our life experience, our relational life in the world, as well as our personal meditation practice, is the venue for the practice. I like to think about the Eightfold Path that it starts and ends with wise understanding and wise aspiration. And so when we think about it, and we might ask ourselves, how has practice influenced us, or how has it changed us? It would be nice to say upon reflection that we're kinder and happier and confident that this is a universal path. And so maybe I'll pull up the Metta Sutta so that we can look at it. Yeah, I think I will. Because there was one other thing I wanted to kind of bring us to a close with before we have some conversation. Just for just a little more personal reflection as we bring this year to a close and see new beginnings. But I'm going to find it in my notes here. I know I'll find it somewhere. I forgot to pin it. See how long it takes me. I probably have it in here. So many places, you'd think I'd have it pinned in several of them, but I don't. Let's see. Here it is. Found. See if you can read this version. I'll try to share my screen and bring it up again. Some of you know I follow Ajahn Sona, the monk that is in Canada. And last year I did a retreat with him on the Brahma Viharas. And it's still posted on the YouTube channel. And he has some really good talks. I've played little bits and pieces of them in some of our sitting groups. But if you look up Ajahn Sona, he's got maybe a half an hour talk on each of the Brahma Viharas. And he has some good conversation about the Metta Sutta. Like I did a retreat with him where he went through the Metta Sutta like line by line. It took maybe 6 sessions or something like that. And he just finished one this year. I think it's over now, on the 7 factors of enlightenment. And he's like a cool drink of water, his approach, I think. So here's the discourse on loving kindness. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm, wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and safety, may all beings be at ease. So there's a whole long setup here in the beginning of this is what needs to be done by those who are skilled in goodness. So then we get into what should be done. What is the blessing? Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, the medium, the short or the small, the seen or the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. Oh, I lost my place. Those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects her life, her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downward to the depths, outward and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. So the major part of it, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, be they great, mighty, medium, short, or small, seen or unseen, living near or far away, born or yet to be born, may all beings be at ease. May none not deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects her life, her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upward to the skies and downward to the depths, outward and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. That is a good resolve to have. That is a good way of supporting our practice, of understanding the Eightfold Path is all in there, and that we can be freed from it. So I think that's certainly enough of my words, and may you reflect on those words for a few minutes and just let's take a few minutes to let the words settle down. Take a few breaths. There are so many good lines in there. let none deceive another. Well, all of those words, now it's your turn.